Here we're at the Mishnah and Chav Beis Amud Beis, Chav Bet Amud Bet. Afu Amar Shlosha Dvarim Lahakel. So Rabbi Gamliel also paskined three halachos in a lenient way. The previous Mishnah we said three things he paskined strict. Now we're going to mention three things that he was lenient. Mechabdin Beis Hamitos. You're allowed to sweep the place where you eat. So we would say Beis Hamitos would be the bedroom. But in those days, they ate on couches. So the mita was in the dining room. So you're allowed to sweep the floor. So in those days, there was an issue because of if the floors were dirt floors. You're trying to get a bottle of water for yourself? Um, so we're worried that if you sweep a dirt floor, you will even out if there's any holes, you're gonna even out the holes. So that's a problem on Shabbos. And you're allowed to put spices on coals on Yom Tov. So we'll discuss it, but the point is that when you put this on the coals, it would make a nice smell through the house. And at the night of Pesach, they would cook a full kid, a goat, with its kishkas hanging next to it, like the Korban Pesach was. The Chachamim ocean, but the Chachamim say you're not allowed to do these things. So we'll talk about these things. So I mean, so the first case, the Chachamim say you can't sweep a floor because you're gonna even out the holes, and that's kind of like I don't think it's I forgot which malacha, but it's I don't think it's the plowing, but it's something related to dealing with the ground. And the spices is to smell the spices is not something that all people like. And on Yom Tov, you're only able to do things that all people like. People like cooked food, so you're out to cook food, but not all people like to smell this stuff, so you're not allowed to do that according to the Chachamim. And if to allow people to eat this whole roasted animal on Pesach night, it looks like you brought a Korban Pesach outside the Beis Hamikdash. And we're not allowed to bring Korbanos outside the Beis Hamikdash, so we shouldn't even do things that look like people are bringing a Korban. Gemara, Amar Ravasi, Ravosi says, Machlokas legamir. The machlokas is not to put spice so that it makes the whole room smell nice. That's okay. The machlokas is if you're doing it to make your clothes smell nice. But if it's just to make the whole room smell nice, everyone agree, even the Chachamim hold you're allowed to do that to make the whole room smell nice. So when it's making the whole room smell nice, everyone can smell it. If it's to do clothes, it's only to make the clothes okay, and it's not really for direct human consumption. So therefore, that's why it's not okay. Mesave, they asked against this halacha. There's a brisa that says you're not allowed to sweep the dining room on Yantif. And the family of Rabbi Gamliel, they would sweep. So that's our Mishnah. Here's the new thing. Rabbi Lazar ben Tzadok said, many times I came after my father to Rabbi Gamliel's house. They would not sweep the dining room on Yom Tov. They would sweep it before Yom Tov. They would put like sheets on top of it. And then the next day on Yom Tov, when guests would come, they would remove the sheets. And you saw that the house was automatically swept, meaning because it was swept before and you covered it, so nothing happened. So that's what I saw in Rabbi Gamliel's house. So if it was mutter if he held it was mutter to sweep the floor, he would have swept the floor, but I would have covered it and then uncovered it when the people were coming. Just let them sweep. Amrullah Chachamim told Rabbi Lazar ben Tzadok Im Kain, if that's what he did, he put the sheets down. After Shabbos mutter lasos came. You're even allowed to do that on Shabbos. So for the fact that he said that something was mutter, it must have been more than this. The ein manichnas hamugmar b'yom tov. And the Beitza continues. You're not allowed to put the spices on these coals on Yantav. And in the household of Rabbi Gamliel, they would. You need me to open this for you? Amar Rabbi Lazar ben Tzedek. Rabbi Lazar ben Tzedek says again, Pa'amim harbe nichnasti achar abel beis Rabbi Gamliel. Many times I went with my father to Rabbi Gamliel's house on Yantav. They would not put spices or besamim on coals on Yantif to make the whole room smell nice. Ela mavin ardaskaos shel barizal. They would bring these metal things. So they article translated sensors. So lahavdil the goyim use it in their avoda, but basically it's a metal thing with holes, and you put spices in, and you see that the galachim, go like this, and the smoke comes out. But what they did, they would fill it with the smoke of the besamim before Yom Tov, and they would stop up the holes. And the next day when guests would come, they would open the holes, and the house was automatically fragrant. So Amrullah, Chachamim said to him, Im Kain, if that's what Rabbi Gamliel allowed, after Shabbos Motelasos Kain, you could also do that on Shabbos, to leave the besamim in this thing. We're at 22b3, the bottom of the first column. You're also allowed to do that on Shabbos. So it happened to be remote. I heard from Ramosha many decades ago. His grandfather, Reb Chaim, was very addicted to smoking. So he used to put the cigarette smoke into bottles before Shabbos, and then on Shabbos he would open it up to inhale the smoke from the cigarettes. So it's a similar thing. You can do it before Shabbos and then open it up on Shabbos. Yeah, he died of a lung problem. Don't if you believe it or not. Rav Aaron has spoke late after the scientists found that smoking causes cancer. He says it's not mutter to smoke, but in those days they didn't know that. Okay, so the Gemara initially said Ravasi says the machlokas is to make this spices underneath clothes so that the clothes absorb the smell. But if it's just to smell, everyone says it's mutter. But according to this, Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov said that they didn't even want to perfume the whole house. So Ravasi's statement doesn't seem to be so correct. So Eliyitmar Hachi Yitmar. So if Rabbi Asi was saying that on one halacha there's no argument between the Chachamim and Rabbi Gamliel, then one halacha it is, you should say the following. Amar Ravasi machlokas lahariach. The machlokas. So we had originally Ravasi said the machlokas was only for clothes, but if you're perfuming the whole room, even Rabbi Gamliel says it's mutter. From this statement, we see Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, eyewitness report that they wouldn't perfume the house. So Ravasi must have said the following, and we had a garbled transmission. So machlokas lariach, the machlokas is the way we thought in the Mishnah. The machlokas that the Chacham Rabbi Gamliel was lenient to say that you're allowed to perfume the whole room, and the Chachamim say you're not allowed to perfume the whole room. Avalagamer aser, but if you're putting this incense under clothes so that the clothes absorb it, even Rabbi Gamliel, who's lenient in regard to perfuming the room, he's strict in regard to perfuming it for the clothes. So, okay. Ibailahu, they had a question. Ma'ula ashen. All right, so la'ashen here doesn't mean smoking cigarettes like it means in modern Hebrew, but it means, can you put fruit over these besamim that you're putting on coals, so the fruit absorbs this nicer smell. So the fruits, you're going to eat the fruits. So Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Asur. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says you're not allowed to do it. Shmuel Amar Mutter, and Shmuel says that you're allowed to. So Rashi says, Rav says you're not allowed to do this because this is not something that most people need. Only people who are very delicate, if something's a little bit off with the fruit, they won't eat it. So they need to have this extra spice in the fruit. So it's not something that's shava l'chol nefesh. It's not equal for all souls. So therefore, it's not okay. But Shmuel says it's okay because it's just a way of eating a food in a fancier way. But at the end of the day, it's still eating. Whether you're rich or whether you're poor, you could eat fruit. So even if you're doing this fancy thing about putting this extra besamim smell into the fruit, it's okay. Rashi adds, it's someone like if a deer happened to come into your property on Yantav. So that's special food. But once it's there, anyone's willing to eat a deer because it's very tasty. But it's just hard to catch. So normally lower income people usually didn't have it. Okay. Rav Huna Amar Asur Mipnei Shemachava. So Rav Huna says that Rav, who says it's Asur, or no, he's that you're not allowed to smoke this because when you put the besamim on the coals, you extinguish part of the coals. Amalei Rav Nachman says, "V'nei Amar b'pnei shemavir." Why don't you say it's because you're burning the spices and like making the fire for something that you didn't really need is also a problem of burning it. So Amar Lei Tchilas Machaba B'Sofa Mavir. So he says you're right, you do burn it, but what happens first? First, when you put it on, it extinguishes the coal a little bit, and then a minute later, then it burns the besamim. So you're right, it does both, but I'm talking about the first problem with it. Rabbi Yehuda says, Al Gabi Gachalas Asher. If you're putting the besamim directly on a coal, it's Asher because what we just said, when you put it on the coal, it's extinguishing the coal a little bit, and then it burns the besamim. As we turn to Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, Al Gabi Cheres Motor. But if you put an earthenware tray or vessel in the oven, just empty, and now you take the hot thing out and you put the besamim on that, the heat from that makes the besamim smell good, but that's mutter because there's no extinguishing, because there's no coals. And even though it is causing the things to burn, but it's an unusual way. It's like kalachriyat. Like when we say kalachriyat, it's like pushing something with the back of your hand. It's not the usual way of doing it. So this is not the normal way of burning the incense on a tray without any coals. So it's not asur. V'Rabba Amar Gabi Cheres Nami Asur Mishum Dekam molid reicha. But Rabbi says even to put these besamim on a hot earthenware thing on Shabbos is asur, not because so there's no malacha involved, but you're creating a nice smell. So Rashi says the problem is that when you're so it's true you're putting this besamim on here to make the whole room smell nice, but by doing that, this vessel is being imbued with the besamim, and so now it's like an infused besamim infused tray or whatever. So that's asur midrabanan because you're making something new. So Rashi says it's close to making a new to a malacha chadasha, a new malacha. The Tosfos gives a different answer than Rashi in the first halacha. According to Rav Yehuda, you're allowed to put the besamim on the cheres. So Rashi says it's only kalachar yad. So Tosfos says that the Re holds that no, it is considered igniting the besamim because they're touching the hot thing. However, on Yantif, that is mutter, even though it's not mutter on Shabbos, but that type of act is mutter on Yantif. Havara shalol tzarech is mutter on Yantif. Burning even for not the need of cooking or light in the house is mutter on Yantif. Okay. Okay. So we're going to make a few more statements about molid reicha, and then I'll tell you a modern application of it. Rabbi Rav Yosef Dami Travayus Chufe Kasa Ashirai B'Yom Tava Aser. Rabbi and Rav Yosef said to put a fragranced cup on pieces of silk or clothing so that they will get the smell that's already in the cup. So meaning you're not putting besamim here. Here the cup already is smell, and you're putting the cup in this clothes so that they smell good. So that's even usher, but it's not midi right. So it's only b'Rabbanan. My time of what's the reason we shouldn't molid reicha. You're creating a new scent, a smell in these silks or in the clothing. So why is it different than rolling besamim, whether it's leaves or whether it's a cinnamon stick in your hand on Yantif that you're or on Shabbos, excuse me, that you're allowed to roll it in your fingers so it smells more of a kot moriach bo, or cut the end off and smell it. So meaning these are already, you had the besamim already in, on your table, whatever. So how come you're allowed to do that? And you're making new smell with that. So Gemara says, Hasam Reha Mia Isa. There, when you have these leaves or you have the the cinnamon sticks, it already has smell. It's just a very weak smell. Yeah, you're getting ahead of me. So the difference is that that leaf or that let's say cinnamon stick already had smell, but it was weak. So by rolling it or by cutting off the edge, you're making it stronger. But there already was some smell there; it just was very weak. You are adding more smell to something that's already there. But But here, these scarves or clothes, whatever it is, they don't have any smell. And by putting um, this fragranced cup in it, you're now making the smell into these clothes that wasn't there before. So it wasn't there at all before. So that's not okay. Okay, so what's an example of this nowadays? So spraying air freshener in the house. So if you have a potpourri thing, that's already there. But if it's in the can, it doesn't come outside the can. So by spraying it, you're making it right. So the question is though, is that if you're doing it just into the air in the room, this is saying it because you're putting it into something where it's going to last. Because when you do it into the clothing are going to stay, the smell is going to stay in that clothing for a certain period of time. If you just spray a room, it's not really going to last that long. So it's not necessarily the exact same situation. We have to see what, I mean, my father told me not to spray the air freshener, even into a room, not even into bigadin. Okay, Rava Amar, Gabi Gacheres Nami Motor. Rava said, so on the very top line here, and going back to the last line of the previous summit, we said Rav Yehuda and Rabba both agreed that you're not allowed to put the besamim on the coals on Yantif because you're extinguishing the coals a little bit first. Rava says, Agabi kechalas nami motor, you're allowed to put the besamim on the coals also, midi to havi abisra gemuri. Just like you're allowed to put meat on coals on Yantif. So Rashi says it follows the svara of Shmuel that even though it's not necessary to cook that way, but if you want to cook so I mean we use a grill, we don't put it directly on the coals, but I guess in those days they put directly on the coals, so it's a form of cooking, even though it's going to extinguish the coals a little bit, but it's for yeah, they were already yeah. So according to Rashi, you have to say it that way. It seems according to Tosfos, you Tosos wouldn't need to come on to that reason. Tosos would just say, I mean, Tosos wouldn't argue, but he would be able to be a little bit more mako. Okay. For those in the English, it's 23A1, the top of the second column. Darish Rav Gvia mi Beiksil, Apisco de Beirish Galusa. Rav Gvia from a place called Beiksil gave the following drasha by the doorway, the entranceway of the Reish Galusa's house. The Reish Galusa was the head of the Jews in Bava. He wasn't necessarily a Talmud Chacham, but he seemed to Talmid Chachamim would be at his house a lot. So the Reish Galusa was a title, it wasn't a specific person. E Keturah, Keturah Shari. Keturah is allowed, but we don't know what Keturah is. It's from that word, but what exactly type of did he mean? So the Gemara is going to say, Amrle Amemar, Amemar said to him, My Keturah, what do you mean when you say the word Keturah? E Keturah biyade, if you're doing Keturah of sleeves. So this was some type of it was sleeves of shirts or the what do they call it in pants? The same way you put your arm in a sleeve, the thing you put into each pant. There's two in each pant, one for your right leg, one for your left leg. So there was a certain thing of tying the bottoms together or something. We're not exactly sure what it is, but that was part of making the pants. That was called couture. So Amemar says if couture is talking about on the clothes, Maisi Umanhu, that is what a craftsman has to do. That's part of making the pants. So that's certainly usher on Yantif. V'ila ashein, and if you mean to you're using ketoras, you're putting besamim on coals in order to imbue smell into fruit, usher to havim kamachaba. You're not allowed to do that in Yantif either, because when you put the besamim on the coals, you're extinguishing the coals a little bit. So what do you mean? What's the case? And whichever the two cases I can think of, it wouldn't be mutter anyway. So I don't know what you're teaching me. So Amarle Ravashi said to Amemar liolam la'ashi. He means that you're smoking that you're putting besamim on coals to smoke it to get it into the fruit. Midi dehavia bisra agumre. And it's the same way that you could roast meat on coals. So he's saying also that Rav Gvia Mibeksil is saying like Shmuel that that just like you could put the meat directly on the coals, even though the coals are going to get a little bit extinguished at the very beginning. For Besamim, it's the same thing. Igada Amri. Some say that the statement, this whole incident with Rav Gvia was a little bit different. Amrle Amemar said to Rav Gvia, "My keturah. What do you mean by keturah? Ikatur biyade. If it's keturah of the garments, of the sleeves, of the shirts, and of the pants, Maisi Umanhu. That's what a craftsman does, and that's certainly aser on yantiv. V'ila ashin aser to come molid reicha. And if it's to smoke the fruits, it's molid reicha. So meaning." In the first version of the story, the problem was that when you put the besamim on the coals, you're extinguishing the coals. So that's a dioraisa problem. In this version, he's saying no. The problem is that you're creating the nice besamim smell into the fruit. So that's the drabanan problem of molid recha, of you're creating a smell. So Amravashi Ana Mirtani Hale. So Ravashi says, I told this to Rav Gvia, Umishmei de Gavarabba Amrite Nehale, and I said it to him in the name of a great person, Liolam La'ashen, it's talking about smoking fruit, so midi de Havia Bisra Gume. And it's true that you're molid reicha a little bit, but just like you're able to, so according to this, it sounds like that well, here, I'll tell you what the nafkamina is. Oh, that's what you're saying. So Rashi says that when you put the meat on the coals, you're making the coals have a meaty aroma. So then when you, let's say, cook potatoes on them, you're going to have, a beef aroma infused potatoes. So it's going to improve that. So it is a good comparison. I was learning it the opposite, and I had a certain question. So, but looking at Rashi again. So then so it's similar because by putting the meat on, you're creating a smell into the coals. Now, so I'm probably not right about this, but because I'll tell you why I thought the other way. Because according to this, well, here's the nafkamina. The nafkamina is when you put the meat on the coals, was the meat already fully cooked, or at least, halfway cooked, that it's edible already or not? Because if the meat is not edible yet, so it's true you're putting the meat on the coals, but why are you putting the meat on the coals? You want to cook the meat. It happens to be incidentally that some of the taste or the smell, I should say, of the meat goes into the coals. But that's incidental. The main thing is you want to cook the meat, and cooking the meat is definitely mutter, even though it's potentially deraisa. But it's we learned that you're allowed to do malachos of cooking on yantif, and the problem of putting smell into anything is derabana. Okay, maybe the problem is that, I mean, so um no, so this with the meat, there's nothing to do with spices, but we're saying that either you're going to cook something else with the coal, and now that's going to have smell of meat, or you might like having the smell of barbecue meat in their house or near the house. I don't know exactly if they would cook it in the house when they're cooking like that, but to have the smell is nice. When you go outside and you smell a barbecue, it smells nice, right? So, right. The problem is, I mean, not the problem, um, but for the fruits, the only reason you're doing this, it doesn't need to be cooked. You're doing an extra fancy special thing that most people wouldn't do this before they eat the fruit. They would just eat the fruit plain. So, in order for it to be a more similar comparison, I would think that in order for this to be a closer comparison, Rav Ashi is saying you're putting the coals on the meat when the meat is already fully cooked. And so there's no need to put it on the coals, if not for the fact that you want the coals to imbue some aroma of the meat. Because otherwise, it's clearly incidental, and the main thing is to cook the meat. So if we're saying no, the meat is cooked and you're doing it just to get the aroma of the meat into the coals, now it's a more similar comparison. Okay. You can roast the whole goat with its kishkas hanging next to it on Pesach night. Tanya, we learned in the Beitza. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Todos ish Romi. Todos, the man of Rome. So Rashi says that Todos was a Talmid Chacham, or he was, what's the exact word he uses? Chacham Gadol v'Nichbad, an honored and respected, a great and honored Chacham. Oh, so we're right before the Mishnah. We didn't start the next Mishnah yet. So do you see it started Va'osin Gidim Kulas, a new paragraph. So according to Rashi, Todos was a big Talmid Chacham. I did see some, I think they were Achronim, in Psachim say, was Todos. So I think some other Achronim, they say, well, his name isn't Rabbi Todos. So was he really a Chacham, or maybe he was just a lay leader? Rashi clearly doesn't hold that way. Rashi holds he was a Chacham himself. Hinhiges b'nei Romi, he instructed the people of Rome to do the following thing: to eat a full goat roasted with its kishkas outside of it on Pesach night. In the Aramaic, chad gadya, it's a goat, a baby goat, a kid. Yeah, chad gadya. So in the Korban Pesach could have been a seh or a gedi. But what is it? I mean, A's, Serizim. But that's a sheep. Oh, a gedi is also called a baby sheep. Okay. So it could be a baby sheep or it could be a goat. So he told them to do this on Pesach night. Shalchule, the Chachamim sent to him, if you weren't Todos, who is a big Talmud Chacham, well, in those days still Chacham, wasn't Talmud Chacham yet. Gozrani Alecha Nidoi, we would put you in Cherem. We would excommunicate you. Because it looks like you are telling Bnei Israel to eat a korban outside the Beis Hamikdash. It looks like you had them bring the korban Pesach in Rome, and you're eating it there. So kachim sagadaitach. So what does it mean? They sent him. You're having them eat korban. We know it's not a korban. So ala ema ke'ein kachim. It makes it look like you're eating something close to a korban on Pesach outside of outside why you think the whole thing outside the Beis Hamikdash. So there happens to be two different minhagim on Pesach night. One is we don't eat any lamb or veal on Pesach night, so it doesn't look like we're eating from a korban Pesach. And we also don't eat anything roasted, even if it's turkey or chicken, which clearly isn't a korban. We don't eat sli, we don't eat roasted stuff on korban Pesach. So we have it's strong minhagim based on this not to do anything that looks like we're eating a korban on Pesach night because of this. In Mishnah, there are three things that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah allowed, and the Chachamim said you're not allowed. So it seems to be that some of these are talking about Shabbos, and some of these might not be. The first case is definitely talking about Shabbos. His cow went out with a strap between its horns. So the strap didn't do anything. It's like putting a bow in the hair. So it's and to put a bow on a cow or on the bull, it serves no purpose. So it's like it's going around carrying something on Shabbos. The second thing, you're allowed to use a comb on the hide of your animal, like to comb it out. I mean, I don't know why they do that. I mean, I think the race horses, so they look good. They comb it, and the problem is that, well, I think the Gemara says this. If the Gemara doesn't say it, it's a metal comb, and so the teeth of the comb are relatively sharp, and it causes the animal to bleed. And so that's going to be a tolda of shoche. You're not allowed to shaft an animal, but to cause blood, even from a person or from an animal, is a tolda of that. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said it was allowed, and Chachamim didn't allow you to do that. That was on Yontif. But the first case about the cow or the bull going out with the strap, which made it look like it's carrying, that was on Shabbos. And the third, you could grind peppers in their grinder. So nowadays, fresh pepper, there is a thing and it grinds it with its cutting blades. And in those days, it was still more of a mortar and pestle type thing. you had the bowl, and you had like a filter or a sieve in there, and then you had the was it the pestle is the thing that you would crush it with, and then you would pick up the sieve. So in case there was some stuff that wasn't finely ground, you wouldn't get that stuff, and you would. So you're allowed to grind peppers in the only that pepper grinder. So even though you're allowed to cook, you're not allowed to do grinding. Now, according to some Rishonim, the reason um, is it looks like it's a weekday activity, even though it's not, or um, grinding isn't necessarily close enough to the cooking process. Stuff you need to do specifically for cooking, okay, you could do, but not grinding. Now, I think we mentioned quite a while ago already. We mentioned about spices. I don't remember where. We have to find it, but we mentioned that grinding the spices is not necessarily something you can do before Yom Tov because it's much better when it's fresh. So, I have to remember what that Gemara was talking about here. What that Gemara was talking about, and learn that Gemara with this Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ain mekardin esavhem of Yom Tov." You're not allowed to comb the coat of the animal with this metal comb that could cause it to bleed. Because it makes it bleed, makes a wound. The Chachamim omrim, but the Chachamim say, "Ain makar." Excuse me. Avo mekartzifin. So the mekartzifin was a comb that was made out of wood, and the teeth of that comb were not as small and they weren't sharp, and that wouldn't cause the animal to bleed. So Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to comb the animals with that type of comb that isn't going to cause bleeding. The Chachamim say in mekardin aflo mekartzifin, and the Chachamim say you can't do either. So it seems that the Chachamim say that it might be a gzeira. If we see someone combing the thing, they may not realize it's the coarse wooden comb that doesn't cause bleeding, and you'd also do. And then they would come to use the metal one also. The Gemara is going to say that there's actually several machlokim going on between these, but we see a three-way machlokas here. That the Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah says you can even comb it with the metal comb, even though it's going to make it bleed. Rabbi Huda says you can't do that, but you could use the wooden comb with coarser bristles that's not going to make it bleed, and the Chacham say you can't do either. Okay, Gemara. Lameimar, Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah had a pariyahaba. So the Mishnah said that Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah's cow or bull, it's a song, it's not a regular episode. So it is, sound is that. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah only had one cow. The Amar Rab, but Rab says, "V'ami Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab," and some say Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab. Tleiter alfei egle havi ma'is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah me edre kol shata v'shata. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was definitely wealthy, so his meiser was 13,000 calves every year was his meiser. So a few weeks ago, we read the mitzvah of meiser behema. So the mitzvah of meiser behema is you put your newborn, your animals that were born that year into the pen. You make a little hole, a little opening in the pen, and you let them go out. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. On the 10th, you put some red paint on it, so you could tell. You don't have to pull it away, but you put this paint on it so you could see which one was the 10th. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You put paint on it. So that's meiser behema. So if a tenth of his flock was 13,000 and those were the newborn, what he's saying, his cow went out. I mean, he obviously had he would make a Texas cattle rancher proud with the size of his flocks, or make Asaph proud, or after with the amount that Yaakov gave to him. So Tosos though has an interesting point, and even though it's not but it's an interesting point. So Tosos says Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah lived after the Chorban already, because Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi before Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and Rabbi Gamliel was already after the Chorban, because Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the Nasi at the time of the Chorban. And Rabbi Gamliel was too young then. That's Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the Nasi. So, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah at the time that he became Nasi was only 18 on Pesach night. We see Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, I'm like 18, I'm like 70. Why is he like 70? Because he was only 18 years old at the time. So, it doesn't make sense that in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when you had to give this Meiser, he had these huge flocks. It doesn't make sense. What's these flocks he's talking about? So, and the Gemara says in Bechoros, after the Chorban, they didn't do any Meiser Behem anymore. So he gives a few answers. One answer is that it was having to give Meiser Behema ended soon after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, but not immediately after. So there was still a time that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah could have been obligated. Second answer is he inherited it from his father, and so the Apitrapis, the court-appointed guardian, we had the word Apitrapis in the Gemara Ksubos here already. So the trustee or the court-appointed guardian in charge of the property, he had to take the meiser of that, and that was still in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. Or it wasn't literally meiser of meiser behema, but that was the tax that he had to give to the king. So according to Tosos, meiser may not literally mean meiser in this case, but might mean a tax, a 10% tax. Okay, so that's not related to Yantav that much, but I think it was interesting, so I wanted to mention that Tosos. So he had hundreds of thousands of animals. So why does it say his one? Let's just keep 746. So Tana, so it was taught lo shelo haisa. It wasn't his. Ela shel shchento haiso. It was his. It was his neighbor's. It was his neighbor's animal. But because he didn't protest, Nikri Sal Shmo was called his animal. So because he should have protested and didn't, it's called his. So just in order, I guess, to make this a little bit more understandable, even it's just like we're not allowed to do malacha. Our property and our family aren't allowed to do malacha. So if my kid wants to do malacha, I have to say no. It's Shabbos. We can't do that malacha, even though it's not me. There's shvisas mishpachto, there's shvisas beso, and shvisas behema. Your eved can't do malacha, and someone's not the and and was reading a story once. It wasn't from a halachic aspect, but someone had let's say it was Cohn's butcher shop or Cohn's auto parts, and he was closed on Shabbos, but his truck was broken. He brought it to the mechanic, and someone needed the mechanic let someone drive Cohn's auto parts or Cohn's butcher shop truck, and people thought that Cohn's truck was working on Shabbos. It's a similar Indian, except in that case, that this guy literally didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't in his domain because he took the truck to the mechanic, but then the mechanic gave it to someone to drive, and people were thinking it was driving on Shabbos. But okay. And you can comb the animal's coat on Yom Tov. We learned in the Brisa, Ezo Kerbe, Ezo Kirtzuf. What's the difference between Kirud and Kirtzuf? Kirud Katana Va'osim Chabura. Kirud are fine or small bristles or teeth of the comb, and it makes the blood come in the animal. Kirtzuf Gedolim Ve'inosim Chabura. The Kirtzuf, hello. Kirtzuf, we're going to dive into the big show in about 10 minutes. Kirtzuf is coarser, thicker teeth, and it seems to also be wood, not metal, and it does not make the animal bleed. The Gimel Machlokus V'Davar, and in our Mishnah we have 3 Machlokim going on. Rabbi Yehuda Savar Davar Shein Miskaven Aser. So there's a Machlokus, a fundamental Machlokus in Shabbos. What if you do a malacha that you didn't intend? So we'll talk about it in a moment. Rabbi Yehuda Savar Davar Shein Miskaven Aser. Rabbi Yehuda says something that you didn't intend to do on Shabbos. is still usher. You didn't intend to do this malacha, but if by doing something the malacha happens, it's usher. Mihu kerid ketana va'osem chabura. But when you do kerud, the small, sharp metal teeth are going to wound the animal. Kirtzuf gedolim ve'nosen chabura, and the kirtzuf are bigger, coarser teeth that aren't going to make blood. V'lo and kirtzuf atu kerud. And we don't make exera that you're not allowed to use the wooden coarser comb, lest you come to use the metal. Oh, so Rabbi Yehuda, and there are chachamim who agree with Rabbi Yehuda that davar she'eino miskaven is aser, an unintended thing is aser. So here, your only goal is to comb the coat of the animal, and then unintentionally, it's going to bleed, but it's inevitable. So the other example of this, the classic example is you're dragging a heavy bench through the dirt. So you don't intend to make a little furrow or a ditch in the ground. But Rabbi Yehuda says by schlepping this heavy thing, it's inevitable to happen. So even though it's davar she'eino miskaven, you have no intention of making this ditch, but it's aser. And Rabbi Shimon, we're going to see in a few moments, Rabbi Shimon says it's mutter, and the Rishonim point out, but Rabbi Shimon agrees when something is 100% inevitable. So the psik reisha. So the Gemara says psik reisha v'lo yamos. They used to, before the time of kids, Danny, do you know what they used to give the kids to play with as a toy? They would cut the head of a chicken off and give the body to the kids to play as a toy. That was in the time of the Gemara, that was the toy. They didn't have teddy bears. So they used a real chicken. What? Oh, would they play with the head? Oh, because they ate the chicken and they play with the head. Okay, maybe you're right. But Baruch Hashem that you came to teach us this. Okay, they played with the head. It makes more sense. So the Gemara says, so the man said, I cut the head off because my kid needed a toy. But what happens when you cut the head of the chicken off? You kill the chicken. So psik reisha v'lo yamos, are you separating psik? Are you cutting off the head and it's not going to die? So when it's something that's 100% going to happen, even Rabbi Shimon agrees that it's aser.
But sometimes the chicken, you cut the head and it's still.
But it's still dead. Right. It's dead.
So he's right.
Yeah, involuntary muscle spasms. There must be some there's static electricity in the air and it's arcing into its. Okay, so then turn it off. Well, here, I'll put.
So didn't think about it.
Well, that's a different machlokas rishonim. So the aruch is and Reb Chaim felt like the aruch that if it's right, so in that case you could be that yeah, you're correct about that.
Yeah, my father would have felt that. If it's really the one meat then
Right, so right, so I think that's the aruch shita. So Ramosha, a lot of things that you have to on Shabbos. He said, do it this way, and then it's and then it'll be mutter. Right. Right. I need to go to his class. Rabbanan, so the Chachamim say you can't use either type of comb. They agree with Rabbi Yehuda that even though you're not intending to cause blood, when you comb it with this fine-tooth comb, you're going to poke it and it's going to bleed. And even though it's not going to bleed with the wooden comb, but we make exera, we're worried that you're using a metal comb, so we say you can't even use no combing at all. V'gazrinan kirtzuf atu kerud, and we say you're not allowed to use the stubby wooden comb lest you come to use the sharp metal comb. Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, who says you're allowed to even use the comb that's going to cause blood, he holds like Rabbi Shimon. To Amar davar she'eino miskaven mutter. He holds something that you don't intend to do as mutter. So I don't intend to make a ditch in my dirt when I'm schlepping this chair. So Rabbi Shimon would agree. So that's davar she'eino miskaven. So he says it's mutter, but we pass that Rabbi Shimon would hold if you're carrying something heavy and it's inevitable that it's going to make it. Even he would say it's a psik reisha. If it's inevitable, it's still aser. And we have an interesting thing. Let's just finish quickly before mincha. Uvein kirtz of shari, and therefore it doesn't matter. Certainly the wooden thing is okay, and even the metal one is mutter to comb with the metal thing. Amar Rava Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel va'Amir Amar Rav Nachman l'chudei halacha Rabbi Shimon. We pass on Rabbi Shimon. Sharei Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah modelo because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah agrees with him. Now we do pass like Rabbi Shimon. Amarle Rava Rav Nachman Rava asked Rav Nachman v'lema Amar halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Why don't you say that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda shahacharei chachamim modim lo because the chachamim agree with him. So Amarle Anu Rabbi Shimon severely. I hold like Rabbi Shimon. But oh, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah modelo. And also, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah also agrees with him. I hold like Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah also agrees with him. Okay, we ran out of time here, and we got the very top of the next Mishnah. So, okay, so the thing I was thinking of, we're at the God willing, I'm going to finish the parak next week. We're going to talk about this wagon. That's might be an exception to Rabbi Yehuda, but Darshan Miskavin about dragging the bench, like I just talked about. But just because we spoke it out, mentioned this. So if you're pulling the wheels on the wagon, even Rabbi Yehuda might be matter. We'll see it next week, because in that case, you're not digging up any dirt. You're just pushing it down because it's a wheel. So in that case, that might not be us or even current Rabbi Yehuda because you're not displacing any dirt the way that plowing a field, you're moving the dirt, you're displacing it. There, it's just compacting it. So that might be much even according to Rabbi Yehuda. We'll see that, God willing, next week.